I think sometimes we need to make people uncomfortable because if you don't, then we won't see positive change. So let's go ahead and let people be uncomfortable.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. What do you do when the story your grandchild needs doesn't exist? Teal McCoy didn't set out to become a children's author or launch a publishing company. But when her granddaughter Delilah was diagnosed with a rare and severe seizure disorder, she started searching for books that would help Delilah see herself. And what she found instead was a stunning gap in the market. Only 3.4% of children's books featured disabled protagonists. So she did what any fiercely devoted grandmother would do. She wrote the story herself. In this conversation, Teal shares the emotional and creative journey behind her debut novel, Delilah vs. the Ghastly Grim, a middle grade fantasy inspired by Delilah's real life experiences. We talk about what it means to see yourself on the page, how disability is often erased or fixed in children's media, and why real inclusion starts with telling the truth about who our heroes are. She also shares what it's like to build a book and a publishing imprint from scratch while working full-time as a psychiatric nurse. If you've ever wanted to create the thing that doesn't yet exist, or you felt like an outsider looking for your place in a story, this one's for you. Teal McCoy, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
I'm excited to talk to you. Today's a little different rebellion because usually we're on this show, we're talking about joyful rebellion where a person realizes there's a time in their life where things just need to change. They've been on a certain track, and to live the life they really want, they need to make changes going forward. And those conversations are fun, but this one's a little different because you had someone really close to you and you saw a need out in the world that wasn't being met anywhere else really, and you decided to take it upon yourself to start filling that need. Take us back to that realization and just walk the listeners into what is it you do?
Sure. The person close to me is my grandchild, my granddaughter Delilah. She was diagnosed with what is a rare and sometimes catastrophic seizure disorder called Dravet syndrome. Most people have never heard of it. They don't really understand what it is because it's not like regular epilepsy. It is definitely more severe. It's a genetic disorder caused by a mutation in the SCN1A gene. And so basically what happens is some of these kids have very severe seizures. They can be 20, 30, over 40 minutes long, very, very long seizures. Wow. They can happen weekly. They can happen daily. They can happen multiple times a day. And so it causes a cascade of other issues. That could be physical issues. It could be developmental issues, speech issues. So she gets a tremendous amount of therapy. So that's the reason why I took an interest in children's literature, pretty much, because she's 4 years old. And I came across this study by the Children's Cooperative Book Group or something like that. And I don't know how old the study was. It came out a while ago, but I haven't seen any research since that really indicated any major changes. But it said that only 3.4% of children's books feature a disabled protagonist. And that kind of lit a fire under me because of my grandchild. I feel like kids, all kids, everyone deserves to be able to read stories that they can connect with the characters. They can see themselves in the characters. And the books that are out there, they're often problematic where they try to basically change the character, heal them. So you can't really fix a genetic disorder. They are now. There's some things that are happening now thanks to technology that we're able to do, especially with CRISPR being around. So I didn't really like the idea of her not having books out there that she could connect with the characters. So I decided to write one to bridge the gap in the children's literature market. It's a major issue, inclusion. And I don't think a lot of people talk about it. Representation in general is problematic, but inclusion of kids with disabilities is definitely something that has to be addressed. If you look at the statistics of 3.4%, that's just ridiculous. And I wrote the book to kind of address that. And I like what you were saying, like, I think that a lot of times people let others decide how everything will go for them. And that's including in the industries too. In your life, in the world, you just let others make the decision. And it's not just with this book. I think over the years, I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to let anyone else make decisions for me. I remember when I was a young girl and in high school, I wasn't a great high school student, but that's because I let others tell me I wasn't very smart. And then I found out like my test scores came in and I scored really well. And I was like, that can't be right. But I had people telling me, oh, you can't be this because you didn't do well in this. And I was like, well, I didn't do well because I never tried because I believed that I couldn't do well. And then once I found out, wait a minute, your scores are coming in, but they don't match what your grades are. And I was like, maybe if I tried. And when I tried, I found out I could do all of it and I could do it very easily. So then like I let others tell me who I was. And so I think that as you go through life, if you experience that, you'll have other people be naysayers. You'll have other people tell you have to be one thing or another. And I think over the years, I've learned not to let that happen. People will say, oh, you got a job. You have to stay with that job for the rest of your life. No, you don't. No, you don't. You get one shot at this life. Make sure you're doing it for you and not somebody else.
That's what I love to talk about every single week here. People who are handed a script and told, this is what you should do, this is what you ought to do, or this is what you are. In a lot of cases where you experience that, where people told you, oh, you're just not a good student. You're not this. You're not enough in some way.
I was actually told by a school counselor that I shouldn't be a nurse because I wasn't good enough in math. And I wasn't a great high school student. I'll recognize that. So I let her steer me away from becoming a nurse, and she steered me towards soft sciences. So I went and I got a degree in psychology. But I had always regretted letting one person kind of decide the direction for me. And so later in years, I continued on through school and started to do really, really well, to be honest with you. I was basically 4.0 through college. And then I became a professor, and I ended up going back to school and becoming a nurse. And I graduated top of my class in nursing. So one person kind of cost me years, I would say, for something that I had wanted to be. That's the thing. If you listen to everyone around you, there's always somebody there that's going to say, no, you can't do this or you can't do that. And that's true for this book too, for Delilah versus the Ghastly Grim. There are a lot of gatekeepers who say no to writers. Even if you're a very talented writer, unless you're known and they know they're going to be able to make money off you, chances are you're going to get a lot of no's. And you can let that defeat you. You could say, okay, well, I'm not good enough. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people. They just accept what others are saying, and they accept that maybe they're just not good enough, and it's not necessarily true.
For sure. And it's funny you say that because several weeks ago, I talked to a guy from Australia, and he's written, I think, 12 books at this point, and they all center around happiness. For the last, I think, 25 years, he's been writing these books, and he was always a cartoonist. And he wanted to create a book. He created all of these illustrations. And his first book, he got, I think, 17 rejections until he got the 18th letter. And that was an acceptance. And it was from, literally, he said it was like one country over from him. And it was the folks who published the phone book for that place. And they said, yeah, we're interested in your book. And he was like, okay, rolling. And now, like 12 books or 11 books later, but we don't know what we don't know at the time, right? So when this person's saying, oh, you don't have the scores or you don't have the aptitude to be this or that, and you're like, oh, okay, well, okay, better find something else.
Yeah. I'll accept this a lot in life because somebody else told me this is what I'm. And the truth is, people feel better about themselves by keeping people down. I mean, that happens quite often. I feel like sometimes it's even people close to you. They don't want you to succeed because if you succeed, it might make them feel less in some way. But it's not true. You should be able to share it and enjoy it together.
It can be uncomfortable for them to either, if they really care about you, it can be uncomfortable for them because they don't know what you're getting into and they're just trying to protect you. They're trying to protect themselves. Maybe their intentions are good, but they don't know what you know. I remember the same thing happened to me when I was getting ready to go to school, and I told my grandmother that I was going to go to school to be a photographer. And she was like, well, how do you make money taking pictures? And I was like, well, it's an actual job. But she just had no frame of reference. And it's what I've been doing for 30 some years now. And it's always been my profession, and it's been great. And she didn't discourage me. She was just like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Like, how are you going to make that work?
You can make good money maybe being a photographer.
Yeah, depending on what you do. I mean, it is one of those jobs where every day is Tuesday, I feel like, where it's like there's not really days off, but you get little moments here and there. But I'm curious, when you started down this road, because you didn't just decide, okay, I feel like this population's underrepresented, I'm going to write a book. You started a publishing company. So I want to know a couple of things. How old was Delilah when you decided to embark on this adventure? And how did you go about going from, okay, I want to write books about this topic, or books that involve this topic, to creating a completely independent publishing company for yourself?
So Delilah was 3 when I started. She's 4 now. It did take a while. I was very careful with releasing this book. I didn't want it out to the public until I was 100% sure that it was ready to go out. I edited it in the area of 30 edits. I had it professionally edited twice, once by a literary agent, and she's an award-winning writer herself, Erin Young. And then the second, another editor, the editor of Hunger Games, actually edited Delilah versus the Ghastly Grim. And then I also got a professional artist, award-winning artist, to do the cover. So I wanted to make sure 100% that the book was ready to be released. And as far as doing it under my imprint, that was actually suggested to me by another writer, because I was really unsure of how I wanted this to work. You know, I'm getting a little older. There's a long process to getting a book done through the traditional means. There are pluses and minuses through the traditional means. They definitely have more reach and better marketing teams than, say, a little imprint. They have built-in systems in place that help promote your book. And that's something that you have to take on yourself when you start your own company. But you can get it out faster and have more control over what stays in and gets removed from the book, and how everything works with the book if you start your own company. It's actually not very hard to start your own imprint. It's a couple $100 and you can do it. But the hard part is actually marketing the book. That I work pretty much morning to night. When you say it's every day's a Tuesday, it's a Tuesday for me too. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all rolled into one. So it's around the clock work for marketing. And that I don't know that I was necessarily prepared for. So I'm still learning, and there's a learning curve there, and I'm still learning. But the book is doing well. It came out at the end of May. It's won 3 awards, and it's hit 3 different bestseller lists on Amazon. So it's doing well. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, it's a very competitive market. I don't know where the book will end up landing in the end. But my whole purpose of it is to just put it in the hands of kids who might benefit from reading it, make them feel empowered. If I can do that even with one kid, the whole process is worth it.
What was it like when you got to show your granddaughter the final product? What was that first read like for you?
So she hasn't read the book because she's too young. There are some dark moments in the book. You know, in the book, it features a young girl who has a life-threatening seizure disorder. And when she's having a life-threatening seizure, an indigo door opens in her mind that catapults her to this fantasy world called Other Sphere. Now, in the book, she's in 2 places at once. She's in Other Sphere, but her physical body is still on Earth. And they have to put her in a medically induced coma. So there is some stuff in there that's very unusual. They have to put her in a medically induced coma to control her seizure, which can happen with these kids because their seizures are so bad. And basically when they do that, when they medicate her to put her in the seizure, that closes the door. So now she's trapped in this fantasy world. Yeah, and so she has to face danger. She has to go on a quest, and she wants to get home. So that is really the premise of the book. So Delilah is too young for something like, there's some darker elements in there. She's too young for that. But she knew the book was being written for her. And I make these little commercials, these little animated commercials to like promote the book. And so she's seen those. So my daughter has shown her the commercials, and right before I received my copy, my first copy of the book, with the cover and everything, my daughter showed her one of those little commercials. And she said, oh, Nana has the book now. It's at her house. And I'll never forget it. 3 years old, kind of walks in the house and she just goes, Nana, show it to me. That was it. Just show it to me. And so it was like hysterical. A great moment. I was like, what? Did you tell her to say that? And they're like, no, we didn't. We showed her the commercial. That was it. And then she was like walking around with it. She hugs it. Sometimes she sleeps with it at night. So just to see her reaction to it. This is the book. And so on the cover, you can see that the girl has a white streak in her hair. And I was very probably annoying to the illustrator that I wanted the girl to look pretty close to my grandchild. She has long brown hair and she has a white streak that she was born with, almost like in the Frozen character, only my real girl does actually have that. So she looks at this cover and she's like, that's me. I was like, yes, it is. And like, so she kind of recognized, and she can read her name, so she can tell her name too. She recognized that that was her on the cover, which I thought was awesome.
That is so cool. And even though right now she's really not able to read it, she's not of the age that your target is, she understands what it means to her.
She does. She kind of understands what happens in the story. Like, even though if she's young, she has been to hospitals. She has been to doctors. So she understands some of that because she's living it right now. She has to go to therapy multiple times a week. So some of this she gets on a daily basis, so she does understand it more than the average child her age. She'll like, who's that? And I'll explain the character kind of thing to her, but just enough where she could understand it, but where it's not dark. It's more playful because of her age.
And when it comes to creating a story like you have, it sounds like a really cool story, no matter what the protagonist was going through. If they had a certain thing that they had to work through in their life or work with, it sounds like you can't work through what Delilah deals with on a day-to-day basis, but you work with it somehow. Outside of that, it sounds like a really cool story, but I'm curious, how's it been received by all the folks that you've been talking to? If you've done book signings, the people who have grasped onto it the most, what are some of those conversations like?
So I have been receiving a lot of feedback on it. It has been picked up, like it's going to be in a school in Indiana. They're going to carry it on the epilepsy unit at Boston Children's Hospital because it did hit #1 on the list for Amazon's children's epilepsy health, even though it's fiction. And so I do ask for as much feedback as possible because it also helps me learn as to what people really want or what children are going to gravitate towards. What I'm surprised about the whole thing is I did write it to be a children's book, but I'm actually finding a lot of adults saying that they're reading it. Yeah? Yeah. More adults are saying, you know, I was reading it to my child and then I loved it, so I gave it to another adult to read, because there is a lot in there about kind of feeling like you don't fit in. And I think even adults can feel that way quite often. I know I've felt that way. Sometimes I still feel that way. If you feel like you're outside looking in, this might be a book that resonates with you because that's part of her journey, being different from others or feeling different from others and not quite fitting in. That's part of what's in the book. And so I was surprised to find a lot of the feedback is coming. I'm told all the kids that are reading it really like it. And I was really happy to find out that neurodivergent kids are gravitating towards it. Like some that I'm told never read are liking the book, which is making me very happy. But also young adults and even a few older adults are saying that they're reading it and they're enjoying the book too. So far, all the feedback has been very positive. It has received 5-star reviews from Reader's Favorite, from Literary Titan. So it's been professionally reviewed too. And so it's getting a lot of positive buzz. I haven't really received much in the way of negative, but part of the reason probably for that is I put it through a very rigorous editing process with 2 professional edits and then 30 edits by myself. So I really spent a lot of time to try and remove anything that might be something that wouldn't work. You never know what's going to hit.
Yeah.
You just never know what is going to really kind of connect with people, and you can only do your very best. And I'm hoping people can relate to the characters, and I think that they can. They're relatable characters. All of us at some point or another in our lives feel like we don't fit in. There's stuff in there about bullying. I know when I was younger, I had my bullies. So my sister was probably the biggest bully.
Yeah, ouch.
But yeah, things that people can connect with.
Yeah, and I haven't asked the question, and I'm embarrassed I haven't, but you mentioned that Delilah's 4 now, and she's not quite ready to read the book. What is the sweet spot for kids and this book?
Well, it's written for middle grade, but I wanted it to be a very fast-paced action adventure book. So around the middle grade kids will really take to it because that's kind of like what they like. So I wrote it to be almost like Percy Jackson, but inclusive. And then there's also a lot of Easter eggs in there that kids won't pick it up, but the adults will. Like, for example, I had a book group question why I have 369. Those numbers, you'll see them repeatedly throughout. And I was like, well, if you know anything about Tesla, you'll know that those numbers are for a reason. Indigo doors for a reason. All of it, the adults are picking up on. So they can find the Easter eggs. But the kids, they'll connect with it being a fast-paced book. Middle grade kids would be my target. But I think that what I'm being told is even some young adults are really liking it as well. I wouldn't say it's appropriate for anyone under 8 or 9 years old. I would not read it to them because there are monsters in there. She faces some monsters, and so there might be like almost like goosebump scary scenes in there. So I would say not appropriate for anyone under 8 or 9.
In middle grade is like what, 6th grade?
Yeah, sixth grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. Those are probably the kids who will like the book the best.
I got it. Okay.
Most.
That's cool. So Delilah's got a little
some time. Yeah.
Yeah, she's got some time. That's cool. I bet the first time she gets to tear into it, though, she's going to be like, whoa, this is cool.
I hope so. Hopefully she'll want to read it. By then, the world's going to be so different by then. It's so hard to compete. When I wrote the book, I actually had another author give me advice. His name was Pierce Torday. I wanted it to be a lot of character-based stuff early on, and he said, just be careful with that because it's not like when Harry Potter was released. Like, Harry Potter might not be released today because, like, he doesn't end up in Hogwarts for, like, 100 pages. Today, you're not going to be able to release something like that because you're competing with video games and short on YouTube, and everything's very, very fast-paced. So you have to kind of speed it up a little bit. So that was something that I had to learn how to change my writing style a little bit to be more appropriate for this day and age. So who knows what it's going to be in years to come, because with all this technology, things are even going to be faster 5-6 years from now.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I had someone on several weeks ago and I asked them, he's a technologist, so he likes to dream up ways that we can use technology and enhance our lifestyle, but also enhance our longevity, things like that, like kind of where the body and physicality meets technology. And I was like, yeah, but is all of this technology, is it just making us dumber? He's like, no, I don't think it's making us dumber. It just takes a lot of things away that we had to do before. And I'm like, yeah, but we're just one dead battery on our phone away from being cave people again and not knowing how to make a fire unless we have this technology.
You have a valid point. I think that there was a big study done about AI and how it's making us dumber. And that's because what's happening is, like, let's face it, a lot of kids aren't learning the stuff. They're going to AI to cheat their way through. So, I mean, it's something that teachers now have to watch out for. So you're right on that, because if you have something that's just going to do it for you and it's going to do it faster, not necessarily right, but faster, then you might not develop those skills. So I think that we are going to end up losing skills, and it's going to be idiocracy by the
Well, it is funny because I realized that, so my daughter, she's 17, but she just got her learner's permit. So we're doing the driving thing. I'm in the passenger seat, she's driving, and she doesn't want to have her phone. She's really meticulous about it, doesn't want to have her phone, but she depends on me for all of the directions, which totally makes sense. Now, this is in a town that she grew up in, so she has been down these roads. She knows where these roads go, but I've noticed she's paying so much attention to the road, she doesn't realize there are these things called street signs, and they can tell you where to go if you pay attention, but she's not there yet. And so I'm realizing that, if power blinks and GPS goes away, I don't know if she can make it places. I don't know how anyone's getting anywhere anymore if the power blinks.
Well, pretty soon there'll be self-driving cars, so they won't have to learn even how to drive.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's true.
isn't Uber's releasing more of those self-driving cars, I think, in Georgia?
That's terrifying.
I want to say. Yeah. No, they're already all over California.
gosh.
And then you got the robo-taxi coming out. I mean, you're not going to need to know how to drive. I think it's definitely something that's going to be coming in the future. Good area to invest in.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. No, I'm curious because you wrote a book and now you've created a publishing company. Have you started hearing from a lot of authors or wannabe authors who are writing with characters that are more inclusive of disability? Or what's been your feedback from people saying, hey, I am an author and I want to do the same thing you're doing? Has that happened at all?
It has. There are a few people that I have had discussions with who have sent me some things. So it is my goal to bring on other writers because I can't do it myself. I mean, that's impossible. I also have a day job. I'm a psych nurse. So I have a day job and I'm doing this too. So right now, because we're in the launch for Delilah versus the Ghastly Grim, I don't have a lot of time to be reviewing work, but it is my goal to bring on other authors. And there are some that I want to bring on for sure. And it will be something like I'm hoping for it to be books that are inclusive or spiritual in nature, something that will make a difference to the public that I think will be important. It doesn't necessarily have to be inclusive, although that will most likely be a heavy focus of Blue Round Book Group as we move forward. So I have some in the works, but it's not something that's going to be right away.
Okay. And that leads me to wondering, because this all started when you saw that study and it said 3.4% are represented. I'm wondering what percentage would make you happy when you look at a new report, let's say in 2030, and they saying, based on all the children's literature that's come out in the past year, what percent would you look at and be like, oh, okay, cool, my work is done?
I'm done.
Yeah.
I can go to sleep now. I don't know that there's an actual number where I'd be like, oh, I'm done. I think it's more like I just want to see growth and progress. 3.4% is a ridiculous number. It's just so low. It's ridiculous. I just want to see there more on the market, and I want to see more kids feeling like they can connect with characters. And if that happens, then that would be enough for me. I don't think there's an actual like, oh, I need it to be 35%. I don't know. I'm not looking for a specific number. I just want to see more out there available. And not just more, but authentic. So I think that's important too, because I feel like some of the reason why there's a problem and why the gatekeepers have kind of kept that number down is because a lot of what gets put out there is like they'll heal the person, you know, in the book so that the person no longer is disabled. Well, that does not empower somebody who's disabled or has to live with that on a daily basis. It's basically saying the exact opposite, that you're not good enough. And I think that's the opposite message that we want to give. Or they're so educational, and it's not that I'm opposed to them being educational, but they're so educational that the kids don't want to read it, because it's kind of like, even for me, if I feel like somebody's preaching to me, a lot of times I will shut down. I won't listen. I don't want to be preached to.
Yeah.
So I think that's a problem too. So if you go that route, that's not going to be the route that's going to be helpful. If you do something that's authentic and it's just made as part of the character's life, and this is something that they're living with, but they're going on a quest too. They're doing all the things that other kids are doing too within the parameters of whatever they're experiencing, then I feel like that's going to be what resonates. And as long as I see some growth in there, then that would make me feel better about the whole situation.
So when it comes to the story itself of Delilah, when you describe her going through the indigo door and these things that happen between having a seizure and then maybe medically induced coma, is that real stuff? Is that stuff that happened that kids have described, or is that just a fantasy part, or is it somewhere between?
Part of it is that I'm a nurse and know what could happen. Like if your seizures are severe enough and they need to save your life, sometimes they can put you in a medically induced coma to kind of control the situation. It's very bad when that reaches that level. So some of that is just more like training knowledge. Did that happen with Delilah? No, but she has had very serious seizures. She has not had a seizure in over a year. We have been very blessed with Delilah. She doesn't present like a lot of the kids with Dravet syndrome. Some of these kids have it way worse. It kind of works like a spectrum where you have your high functioning and then you have your kids that are going to need lifelong care. Delilah is high functioning. So we've been very fortunate, and we have, thank goodness for my daughter, who also is in the medical field. She and the neurologist have found a good medication that has kept the seizures away. So Delilah has not had a seizure in over a year. And now, does she still have issues from Dravet? Yes, she does. She still goes to weekly therapy, twice a week, actually, physical therapy and speech therapy. And then every other week she goes for occupational therapy. So she still requires a lot of therapy. But most likely when she gets to be the age of the girl in the book, which is 12, most likely you won't be able to tell. So right now you can see there's some differences. Even though she comprehends where she should comprehend at the level she should comprehend, she verbally cannot express herself the way other kids can. Her articulation isn't there. So I understand her, but a lot of times other people won't understand what she's saying. They can tell that something's going on with her speech. But her intellect is probably even higher. She's extremely bright. So in some ways, we're very, very, very fortunate because she's very high functioning. So she's going to be probably like the girl in the book, where it's going to be hard to tell other than when she has the actual seizures. So that's where she's at right now with all of that. I think I lost the question.
I think you answered it, but my question now, just now that I'm thinking about it, is a lot of what you just described, unless you are right there to observe it, unless you have a family member like you do who not only understands a little bit of the medical components of it, I know you understand more than just a little bit, but if you're an author and you're trying to create a story that people are going to love, and you don't have that front row seat like you do to someone who has these things going on in their life, you might be scared to death. I'm just thinking, as you were mentioning some of those things, you might be scared to death to represent them inaccurately, or to create kind of a caricature of what you think it might be like to have a certain disability. And I'm just wondering now, have you had conversations with authors who are like, yeah, I totally would, but my God, I don't feel like I know enough to do it justice?
And they're not wrong to feel that way. And this is interesting too, because it kind of goes along with this channel. It is frowned upon unless you have a family member that you're actively, like, I'm one of her caretakers. Like, my husband and I actually moved to help my daughter with my grandchild's because she required help. So unless you have somebody, a lot of times it's frowned upon to write for a population that you're not familiar with. Like, it would be considered inappropriate for me to write a book about African Americans because I'm not African American. You know what I mean? So you're not wrong on that. There's some things that come into play there. A lot of what is in the book is because I've seen it or experienced it. Even the choices that are made are really, they come from Delilah. I feel like I always say it's not my book, it's her book. A lot of what happens in it came from her. So even like when it came to the Kangaroo Council, I'm religious, so I wanted there to be something based. The theme is about forgiveness, and I wanted there to be some element of scripture in the book. So I said I wanted there to be like a scene with the Sanhedrin. How was I going to do that? And my daughter sends me a picture of Delilah holding a kangaroo, and I was like, well, in the book she's going to face the Kangaroo Council. So it was kind of like everything kind of was rooted in her. She hates snakes. She has to face a cobra, a huge snake. So a lot of it is, I say it's her story, it's not really my story. I was writing a story for me when I actually changed gears and switched to this story. I actually was in a program because I wanted to improve my writing skills. And I was writing a suspense thriller about a psych nurse because I'm a psych nurse. But I switched gears more or less because when I saw there just aren't enough books on the market for kids, I wanted to get that out there first and then kind of go back to my story, which I am still writing.
Yeah. And I guess that leads us to the next thing is people who do have certain populations or things that they could write about. It's our job to encourage them to do it.
Yes, because they have the firsthand knowledge and experience that can bring truth to the subject. I was a director of a school for kids with disabilities. I have a grandchild who has a disability. I am a nurse who engages with people who have disabilities. So I am around this and I see everything that's going on and I have this firsthand information. But it wouldn't be fair for me to write it if I would miss a lot of what's important if I wasn't in this position. Like, I wouldn't feel like I would be the right person to write it unless I've seen and experienced all these things.
Yeah.
But even so, I feel like most likely, if at some point Delilah would be the better person to write something like this than me, because she actually is living it. So I would encourage people who like experience things like this, who have a disability, share that with the world, because there's a huge population of people who are going through those things, and it makes you feel connected when you know others are out there experiencing the same kind of things.
And it just also makes me think about, I'm trying to think back to all of my time. I don't really watch TV or movie. I watch some movies now, but I don't even have a TV. So I'm reading books. I know I'm weirdo, but I feel like I got to a point in my life where I'm like, yeah, I'm good on TV. I'm good on all the shows. But I'm thinking back to my childhood. I can think of 2 or 3 shows that had someone represented on there with some sort of a disability or something that wasn't just a normal mainstream teenager who lived in the suburbs, that kind of thing. And it sounds like the books, children's books especially, kind of follow that same format. It's just, let's present a bunch of people who seem approachable to the general public who's going to read this thing, so that we don't make anyone uncomfortable. And sometimes that's what it comes down to. That's what we talk about on A Joyful Rebellion a lot. Sometimes you need to be uncomfortable to understand what's really going on in the world, what's really going on with other people, because hearing other people's stories, if they don't function throughout life the same way that you do, sometimes a person who maybe goes about their day a little easier, sometimes you feel some guilt about that. But whatever the emotion you attach to it, the kind of the umbrella of it is discomfort. What have been some of the interactions that you've had in talking about that dynamic when it comes to a book or any kind of entertainment, really?
I think you're right. Sometimes there is a level of making people uncomfortable. I think as a writer, I feel I am vulnerable sometimes to the criticisms that come with that, because I don't want to offend the wrong populations. I don't want to offend the ones that I'm actually trying to do something for. So it would disturb me if I knew that I was doing that. But at the same time, I think that you're right. I think sometimes we need to make people uncomfortable, because if you don't, then we won't see positive change. So let's go ahead and let people be uncomfortable so that we can see some positive change. That is my view on it, and I'm okay with the consequence of that, because there is a consequence to it. But it can be very hard. You try to put yourself out there in a way to help others, but it does leave you vulnerable to criticisms that we could be making people uncomfortable. And I think that, one, when it comes to things like literature, there should be some stuff out there that makes you uncomfortable. Otherwise, it's all the same and it's completely boring, and who wants that? And then 2, if you're really trying to do something that's different or outside the fold, most likely you're going to get hit with some feedback that you're making people uncomfortable. They don't like it. So when people feel uncomfortable, they tend to be a little more critical of it. So it is something that you have to be willing to face and kind of steel your spine when you're going to do something like this.
Yeah. And have you experienced that at all in this process so far since May?
I expected to get that, to be honest with you. I have not really experienced a lot of that, but also it's only been out a short time. So I'm sure it'll come, and I'm sure it'll upset me when it happens, but I'm just going to try to steel my spine and tough through it. I mean, it's just like, it's the way of the world. The plain fact of the matter is, I'm kind of with you on this. Like, I think sometimes we just need to be uncomfortable, because by making people uncomfortable, it's like creating change. And sometimes change is necessary and it's good. Hopefully it's for the better.
Well, I want to get your advice, because I look at YouTube a lot when it comes to things that I'm interested in doing. I love some DIY stuff. I'm working on a project right now in my house that involves painting, carpentry, all this stuff. But I do a lot on YouTube with some people that I like to follow about the writing process, about building good characters, about just the narrative, dissecting it and making things the best they can be. And I'm by no means a novel writer. I haven't done it yet, but I'm learning little bit by bit. And if an author came to you and said, Teal, I'm kind of interested, I'm working on this story, I think it would be fantastic if this story incorporated someone who of a special population or had a specific disability. I think it would weave in. I think I could make them come off as very human, but I don't know how exactly yet. What's your best advice to a writer who is interested in doing like what you're hoping more writers do, but have that nervousness and they don't want to misrepresent and they don't want to create just some like caricature polished version, or like you just mentioned that a lot of people might not think about, have someone who is going to be healed magically by the end of the story and treat it like it was a problem to be solved. What would be your advice to that author?
My advice would be to collaborate with somebody who is experiencing what they're hoping to write about. That way they can be sure through this collaboration, like I would kind of reach out to the population that he wants to include and then do research on it, collaborate with those who experience it. And that way, you know, when you're presenting it to the public, you're presenting it authentically. That's probably the best way to do that. So like, for example, say I'm not a psych nurse, but I wanted to write about somebody with a mental illness. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I'm saying you should maybe do your homework, research it, collaborate with others who do have that kind of firsthand knowledge so that you can present that storyline in the most authentic way that will really bring it home to those who are experiencing the disability or the mental health issue. You see what I'm saying?
Totally. Almost like embedding yourself in their world for a little while.
Right. If you were going to write about being a detective, some people might just write about being a detective, but I most likely would approach it as, let me go pick the mind of a detective. You know, let me try and really understand how that mind works so that I could authentically write about being this character in the book.
Now, when it comes to other books, because there are so many books written that honestly, I mean, 3.4% is really small. But out of the number of books that come out every year, that's still more books than we can read every year.
There are so many books coming out.
Probably. I mean, hundreds of thousands of books are published every year. And a lot of those are independent now because we've got that ability. And that's amazing. I've gone that route myself. It's definitely the way to go. Definitely a lot more work. I don't know. I've never gone the traditional route, but I know on the front end, it's a lot more work to get in the door. On the traditional route, on the back end, after you've got it all published, is a lot more work to get eyes looking at it. But I'm curious, let's talk movies, let's talk books, let's talk TV shows. Is there anything that you've just casually been watching and is like, oh, yeah, this is the thing I'm talking about. This does a really good job of representing the kind of thing that I wish would happen more often?
Movies, TV shows. So as far as like inclusivity, I would say, so it's funny because I was watching, my husband's a huge superhero person. He's actually a YouTuber. He's Drum Dums on YouTube and he does movie reviews. So we get to go see movies early. And we recently saw Superman, you know, before it came out. But it made me think about like superheroes who are maybe special needs. And my favorite by far is Daredevil. Okay, because here is a person, you know, I feel like they did a beautiful job there where they show that he lives with this disorder, but look at him. He's still living an amazing life. He's an empowered individual, but he's still realistic where he goes through struggles. He has to live with difficulties. He's a character that you can relate to. So I think that's where a character like him, that's where it's done right. And I think you're right. You know, there's so many books that are released every single day. The self-publishing industry did make it wonderful for writers because you can get out there what you may not have the opportunity to release before. And I think even published authors are now switching from the traditional route to go to self-publishing. I think I read the other day that, like, I want to say it's Gillian Flynn who did Gone Girl. She even said something like, in this market, her stuff wouldn't have come out, or it doesn't promote stuff like that was hugely successful for her because the times have changed. We're facing a lot of competitiveness in the writer's market. Most writers cannot live off their writing. Like me, they have to go to a day job. All you can do is see if you could write something that will make a difference to someone. And I think that needs to be enough.
Yeah, just like a lot of art.
Yeah, art in general. Yeah.
Art in general. That's true. And, it's art that really makes the culture rich and makes a culture what it is. But good grief, it's the artists that suffer through making that art. And I mean, it has to be done.
The starving artists. How many artists didn't get famous until after they were gone? And then they never got the benefit of it. But we as a society, we were given the benefit of it. And I'm sure some of these books that come out and they maybe don't hit right away, later on could hit. My husband was telling me about this movie. I forget the name of it, but it's a kid's movie, and it did very poorly. And then now all of a sudden, 25 years later, it's got an underground following. You just never know.
Yeah.
You may not be right for that time, and then later on, maybe that's going to be your audience, and just, it'll benefit them.
I think with artists and creative, that happens way more often than normal, especially if you think about some of the most famous ones, like your Andy Warhols. And he was famous when he was alive. Picasso was famous when he was alive. But some of the others who were just so far out there that the times weren't ready, the conservative nature of the people of the times or in their country, they weren't having it. And then 30, 50, 100 years later, everyone's like, oh, this guy was a genius.
Yep, they didn't see, so you just need the right eyes on it, I guess. And that's true for books, too. You need the right eyes. You talked about YouTube. You're not going to connect with everybody who's on YouTube. You're going to have an audience that's right for you. And that's what the hard part is about self-publishing, is getting your work in front of the eyes of the right audience. That is probably the hardest part to do, because it doesn't have to be for the entire world. It just has to be for your audience, your right audience.
So what's next for you? What's next for Blue Round Book Group?
So I am still writing the adult book. There is going to be a part 2 of Delilah versus the Ghastly Grim. I left that open. And I already have started the process of connecting with some other authors. There are people who I know that who have never even thought about writing a book. And then after I did this, they're like, I've always wanted to write a book. And I always say, most people have a good story in them. Most people do have a good story in them. And even if you're not the greatest writer in the world, you should get that story down. And then there are people who can help you clean it up. There are lots of services out there that can help you clean it up. It took me a long time to get that to the level that it's at now. I'm kind of a slow writer, actually. It takes me a while to write. So if you have a story in there, don't let somebody else tell you shouldn't tell that story. Try to get it out there, and you never know who it's going to connect with. And then yours might be the one that connects with a lot of people. And I know you said you're writing something, so maybe you could send that over for a read.
Oh, man, I've got a story I've been working on for a while. And I get hung up. I've got a little perfectionism issue that I'm working through. But I've written a couple of books so far that weren't this one. And this is the one that I keep putting off because it seems too difficult. But it's coming up next on, I don't know. But yeah, I've got your website up right now. It's blueroundbookgroup.com.
That's right.
And that sounds like the best way if someone is saying to themselves, because I'm telling you, I hear this all the time from people, especially I had a coffee table book. It was pictures and stories. It came out last November, and I was showing it to friends, just people I knew who I've worked with over the years. They're like, yeah, I've always wanted to. You get that from people if you've ever written something and they share what they would love to tell a story about. And then it's like, okay, cool, do it. Go for it. And they're like,
and a lot of times they're super interesting. You've lived this super interesting life. Go get a pen and start writing this down, because there's a lot of great stories out there. You'll face some naysayers like, oh, well, it's a saturated market. Well, if everyone takes that kind of perspective, then you'll never succeed at anything, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to erect a barrier. Don't pay attention to that. You do your thing. And let turn unfold as it's supposed to unfold. Yeah.
And if they really start getting pen to paper and think, okay, I want to get this out into the world. I want to get it on printed paper. I want to get it bound into a book. They can come see you at Blue Round to help them take it all the way, right?
Absolutely. I could definitely help them with that. It's actually not that hard. Even if they didn't choose Blue Round Book, Amazon does print on demand. It's super, super easy to do. Now, I will say I would recommend taking the time to make sure that it is at a professional level, because I do think that is one of the errors that happens with the self-publishing industry. You want to get it out there so quick that you think first draft is ready to go. Very rarely a first draft is ready to go. Very rarely. If you read my first draft, you'd be like, this girl can't write. You know, it's more like you got to get the story out and down, and then you kind of clean it up kind of thing. So it's got to go through like grammatical edits, and it's got to be designed. You know, and a design of a book is different than an illustration for a book. There's a whole department on that for the big publishing companies. It takes a lot of work to put a book out there. It's not going to be as quick as you think. It took me a long time. It took a year for Delilah versus the Ghastly Grim to go through the whole entire process. And it's a short book. It's a kid's book, so it's shorter than like adult books are longer. But for the person who wants to write, who feels like they have a story, you know, if they wrote 3 to 4 pages a day, you'd be done in like 4 months. Your first draft would be done in 4 months. Then let it sit for a little while, because you can't really see your errors right away.
Yeah.
And then go back for the rewrite. Then have others who are like critical of you, I would say. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
What's funny is I think I drove my editors crazy, because I was like, tear it apart. Don't worry about my feelings. And then you say that, and then somebody will tear it apart, and you're like, gee.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I should just stop now. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, but you want that. You want that so you could kind of say, like, are they right? Maybe I should look at this. So you kind of see things you might, oh, well, in my mind, this was so clear. But to the reader, I needed to add more description here. So it really helps you to have other eyes on it. And there are lots of like social media. If you don't have any money, you can't afford like an editor, there are sites where you could have like other people like read your stuff and give you feedback.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because if you hand it over to your bestie who loves you and wants to support you, and while they're reading the manuscript, they're reading it in your voice because they know your voice, and they're like, oh, this is so cool, and I love this part, and I love this part. And then you hand it over to someone who does this professionally, who's read other work, who knows what works and what loses a reader, and you get completely different feedback. Well, your head's going to be spinning. So choosing the right person, I guess is the best way to say it, is so important, because you can maybe have your bestie read it after someone completely neutral has read through it, given you notes, and you made those changes.
It does help with that. And there are sites that can connect you with like professional editors that do this as freelance. Like Readsy, they vet their editors pretty well. So they're a site that you could go to, and they'll connect you with professional editors. It's not cheap. I will say that's not cheap. But even if you couldn't afford something like that, there are sites where like other authors could read it and give you some feedback on it. And so that can be very helpful too. I think ultimately, in the end, it's your story, your voice, but it is a good idea to have people see it, because when you're really close to a story, you can't always see the flaws in it. And then it kind of opens your eyes to what might be missing or what might need to be taken away. Like, oh, that was like too long. Like, how long does that fight scene really need to be? So it kind of helps you see what the public is going to think of it, and that gives you an idea of where you could do some tweaking, but ultimately keep the voice your own.
Well, that's good advice. TL, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today and sharing your story, sharing the origin of how you started writing this book, who you're writing it for. And it's so important for us, if we see something that's missing out in the world, it's like that bumper sticker, be the change you want to see. You're doing that. I so appreciate that. I so appreciate you bringing this story to all of our attention, everyone listening right now, and just keep up the good work. I'll be cheering you on.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on your show. It was a great time.
Before you go, I've got something for you. If today's episode sparked a little rebellion in you and you're feeling ready to make a shift, grab my free guide, Plotting Your Joyful Rebellion. It's a 5-step roadmap to help you stop performing the life you were told to want and start building the one that actually fits. Head over to ajoyfulrebellion.com to download it, and I'll meet you there. Oh, and see you next week.